Hello, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to thank you for joining me this Saturday. It's morning here where I am. Hello, Heidi. I'm going to pop the chat out here so it's easier for me to read and move along with everybody. Welcome to this week's live event. Hey, hello, Paul. You're very welcome. Yeah, I'm doing quite well this morning. Hello, Jürgen. Welcome to this week's live event. I do not recall your user IDs being here before, but welcome. This is your live event, really, as much as anyone else's. And we're here. This is an hour of time I set aside each week, nearly every week, to answer questions and do some demonstrations and things like that. I have a couple questions that came in throughout the week that I thought were really, really interesting, and so I'd like to address them now. Good morning, Miles. So let me pull up my sheet here. Ah, yes, I thought so, Jürgen. Welcome. So here's a really cool question, and I address this. I don't address this so much in teaching theory on the YouTube channel, but it makes me feel like I ought to. I am a mezzo-soprano, and a lot of the phrases start on D, where my secondo passaggio is. This is a particular song they're working on. I have been doing your exercises, and I'm getting better in that area when in scales and sequences, but can you give me any tips for starting phrases in that area? They still feel and sound weaker, and they happen a few times in the piece. So, and then they go on to say that they've played flute for quite some time and they feel that they're supporting correctly, and without evaluating that directly, it's hard to really say. First of all, if you think you're supporting correctly, I would encourage you to at least verify that. There's a video on the channel, Appoggio Breathing, that details the Appoggio breath management system. Of all the things that I have ever changed about my technique, adopting that system of breath management, which is used in bel canto singing, had the most dramatic and beneficial impact. So that would be step one, evaluate and assess that. The continuity of abdominal musculature engagement that is required in Appoggio in order to retain the suspension of the air column will have incredibly beneficial effects on your tonal onsets, or the attacks, the starts of phrases, like you're talking about there in your piece. I do hope everyone can hear me, by the way. I checked everything. So that's one. Two, when you have assessed that and you're confident that you're on the right path, then practicing tonal onsets in that area of your voice will be very, very beneficial. So there's a lot of scales that are on the channel that start at the 5th scale degree. That's a good way to start working on things. There's also another exercise. That's a really, really good exercise to practice tonal onsets. Thank you, Isaac. I appreciate the heads up that you can hear me okay. And if I didn't say so already before, welcome, Heidi. It's nice to see you back here. I think I'm fairly well caught up. No, Jürgen, I'm not a mezzo-soprano. Yes, Isaac is correct. I was quoting the question that came in earlier this week. It was just a really good question, and so I thought I should address it here. Now, the next question I have is, now this actually relates really, really nicely, kind of, to the video that was just released 5 minutes ago on the channel, which is about the feeling of notes as it goes over the secondo passaggio. I had skip that. The placement of sound goes in a C shape, or question mark shape. The question mark shape is like it's been rotated 90 degrees to the right. And the part with the passaggio is in the dip of both/either shape, excuse me. And it has to be, quote, sung into the chords, which I assume means support. Not so sure about that. It's not, you need support, of course, but I think that they're talking about something different here. It's not a very clear question. Blah, that doesn't matter. Questions are always good. I heard this somewhere before in a singing workshop. Don't really understand it if it relates to best placement. I know that tilt vocal fry can send the sound a bit further backwards. The same goes for a rock sound rather than a clear sound. Okay, so first of all, when we talk about physical sensations about placement, it is entirely subjective. Vocal teachers, singing instructors don't agree on what those sensations are supposed to be. So all of these descriptions mean about as much to me as they do to you. I can only guess at what your singing instructor was trying to show you or teach you. And so, you know, until you start getting into like firm descriptions of musculature and things like that, it's really, really difficult to know because so much of these feelings, the physical sensations, are subjective. Now, moving back to front, sung into the chords. Now, without support, you won't be able to maintain this, but what I assume that your instructor was talking about was vocal fold adduction. And what that is talking about is the vocal folds moving towards the center mass of the body, moving together. Some would say vocal compression, some would say chord closure. And in the zona de passaggio, it's very easy to slide off or allow the vocal fold to separate. And that obviously will not result in a consistent sound. So oftentimes voice teachers will say like sing into the chords or sing further back, things like that, to try to get you to stay with the vocal fold. I almost said stay on the vocal fold. That was the way one of my teachers used to describe that to me, was that you're flying off the vocal fold. And that's about as true as anything else. What's not happening is the vocal fold's not staying adducted, it's separating. And this is where like the oo vowel, you, can help you learn how to retain adduction or chord closure if you prefer. And then you can flip it around. Again, it would be easy for me if I didn't know how to keep the adduction happening and allow the vocal fold to separate. Now, all these talks about C shapes and things like that, and again, like I said, descriptions of that nature that are not discussing the actual physical musculature or internal geography of the oral cavity are subjective. But that sounds to me a lot similar to what another teacher that I encountered some years ago used to talk about, which is that at the secondo passaggio, there's two things it reminds me of. At the secondo passaggio, you want to sing over, they would describe it as over the pencil, and they would actually have you put a pencil in your mouth, and you're supposed to visualize singing over the pencil. Some would say over the hard palate. And that was meant to get you to visualize that feeling of release of tension when you're no longer straining the thyroarytenoid muscles or chest voice muscles to sing those high notes. And that flipping is the sensation that awfully coincides with an untrained registration event. So when you're singing over the secondo passaggio and you're not used to it yet, it sort of feels like it's flipping. The more that you practice it, the less it feels like it's flipping and it feels like a seamless connection. But that takes some practice and some time. The other thing it reminds me of is, again, I need to just figure out who this quote is that I've used over and over again. But they described the secondo passaggio as the waist of an hourglass. And what they're trying to convey in that description was the precision of one's technique. That below the secondo passaggio, there's some latitude, there's some room for error there. And as you get into the zona de passaggio, the precision of your technique needs to become more accurate. And then once you're above it, you get more latitude as well. I think that they were doing that because when you are learning to sing a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio, through the zona di passaggio, there's a great degree of transition feeling. It can feel quite uncertain when you're learning how to do that. And as you get more and more comfortable with it, it feels a lot less certain and it feels much more secure. So those are the questions that came in. Thank you all for being patient with me. I am now flipping back to the chat. And it looks like I haven't fallen too far behind, which is awesome. So I think that those are rather timely questions anyway, which was why I wanted to address them here. I'm talking too loud, so I have to flip my hat off my ears so I can hear myself a little better. But I'm very conscious that I desperately need to trim my sideburns, so I'm feeling kind of self-conscious about that. Anyway, thank you all for your patience. Bishy J Official, how do you sing with a round full sound? Balance. If you want a nice full round sound, work towards balancing your vowels. Start this in the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. This is your chest voice, and move outwards from there. If you feel much of any sense of engagement or strain as you approach the zona di passaggio or secondo passaggio, then you are unintentionally dampening resonances that are prohibiting you from having a full round sound. Make the acquisition of range secondary towards balance of vowel and alignment in the zona di passaggio and into the, in the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, and then ascending slowly into the zona di passaggio. Sonia asks, I don't know if this has been asked often, but why is my low and high register great, but lots of difficulty in middle range? Vocal breaking, hard to sing accurately, etc. Generically speaking, there's some type of imbalance that's happening. It really depends on how you define great and what the actual sounds of your voice are. If it's not consistent, then you're singing one way in your low range and singing another way in your high range, and there's no reason to expect that the middle stuff in between would match it or would be consistent. And it would be subject to breaks and things like that as much as anything else. It also depends on where you're placing that middle range conceptually. If that happens to be in the zona di passaggio or on the secondo passaggio, then again, that just supports the notion that there are inconsistencies in the balance of your voice. It could be too, I mean, by your user ID, Sonia, I may be incorrectly assuming that you are female. But if in the past you have practiced or trained with the notion that the cricothyroid dominant singing voice was to be brought as low as possible, which is a totally legitimate way to train classical vocalists, then it may be that you've never truly developed the thyroarytenoid voice in your mid-range. And as such, it's like, it's like totally new ground. Any of those things are possible. Garrett, this is good stuff on Appoggio. You can hear me. Excellent. Thank you for verifying the microphone again, too. I had a moment of panic where I couldn't remember if I actually adjusted the gain before I started the event. I am a big believer in Appoggio breath management. It's just, I know I say this all the time, so forgive me if I'm being repetitive, but of all the things that I have done and all the different stuff that I have practiced, that changed everything. Adopting that mode of breath engagement it made everything make sense, and it made everything better. Not overnight, but pretty quickly. Garrett, oh yeah, I just read that. Karina, hello Karina. I feel like I had something I was supposed to answer for you. I apologize if I haven't done so. I don't mean to make excuses for myself, but I will say I've been extremely busy and preoccupied with trying to figure out a new camera for the channel. And I did take care of all that. So hopefully in the coming weeks, my memory and note-taking will be a little bit more on top of things. The new camera is really cool, though. You can see it in the new video today. Well, you don't really see the camera, you just see the results of it. Looked a little washed out to me, but I thought it was like it had a bit more sort of field of depth or some kind of thing like that. What's up with the bonnet? Garrett, this is me having a little bit of a bad hair day. And like I said a few minutes ago, feeling a little bit self-conscious about my sideburns that I know desperately need trimming. But yeah, I just, I didn't roll out of bed, but my hair is quite curly, and so it can turn into quite a vertical nest. And rather than subject you all to, well, I should say what's left of the vertical nest, it used to be more of a nest. Now it's like a thinning, it's like an abandoned nest. It's like, you know, it's like the robin's eggs have hatched and like, you know, they've migrated south for the winter. I don't think robins actually migrate. I'm almost certainly wrong about that. But yeah, the nest is not what it used to be, but it still can get quite squirrely. And so I'm wearing my toque this morning, as those of you above the northern border of the United States might be familiar with that terminology, the toque. Paul, there's a way to know if I already have it because my doctor said that it's only an infection but over the medical treatment, I'm still feeling somewhere there. Can't reach across some notes. I'm not sure what you're asking. I hope you're okay. Obey your doctor's orders. Among all things, ask them if you can sing. Oh yeah, Karina Chen, I was watching your vowel placement video. Cool. Can you explain how to do laryngeal tilt? I like your chord closure exercises. Thank you, Karina. I really appreciate that. The laryngeal tilt occurs when the cricothyroid musculature engage as you enter the zona de passaggio. So some people would, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can think about this. My preferred method for teaching this is to focus on adduction of sound and using descending patterns. So like in all those how to sing high note videos, I start with these octave arpeggios and I descend from there. And the direction in the video is to make sure that the sound, you can have this like really ridiculous, dopey, open kind of sound, but you really, there must be no air in the sound. So when you get that you, as opposed to ew, you are, when you got the hollow one, you, then that sound is consistent with engagement of the cricothyroid dominant singing muscles and a more or less neutral laryngeal position. And you've achieved the laryngeal tilt at that point. Because when the cricothyroid muscles aren't directly connected to the vocal folds, I need to know which is, because there's two sets of two cricothyroid muscles. There's posterior and anterior, and I believe it's the anterior set that is attached to the hyoid cartilage, and it's the rotation of the hyoid cartilage that then elongates the vocal fold, and so that's the laryngeal tilt that they're talking about. Personally, I find that to be not as accurate as I'd like it to be. You know, I guess I'm okay with cricothyroid dominant singing because it is somewhat inaccurate by omission. Laryngeal tilt, the larynx doesn't tilt. It's the hyoid cartilage that tilts. And so I have a little bit of a problem with that because it feels a little inaccurate to me. That being said, like, I may have a look into that and make sure that I'm understanding the anatomy properly in that. I haven't looked into that in some weeks, so maybe we can talk more about that next time. JC's Radiant Ray, welcome. It's good to see you. Well, your user ID. It's good to see your user ID here. Thank you for joining us. Naruto, good morning. Good morning to you, if it's morning where you are. I was wondering how to bring more chest into my vocals and upper belts. I am a baritone, by the way, since I can hit high notes A4, but mostly in more of a heady mix. Okay, well, so one, if it's a mix, then it's not belting really. The notion of belting is that the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice is not allowed. You're not allowed to allow the cricothyroids to elongate the vocal folds, so you're forcing the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice to vibrate at a faster and faster pace, and that's what belting is. If you're truly a baritone, I do not advocate belting as high as you're quoting here in your question. And furthermore, your question is a little bit strange, because if you're trying to bring more chest voice into your belts, well, to belt, you have to stay in your chest voice. That's what belting is. If you're looking for a more balanced tone above the secondo passaggio, which you haven't asked, but you are alluding to in the way that your question is worded, work towards balance. Ironically enough, if you work towards balance, you will sound more consistent than if you continue to try to force your chest voice higher and higher, which you haven't said that you're doing, but it sort of sounds like that's what you're talking about here. Balance is the way to reconcile the differences between those tones. That's basically it. Yeah. Ugly Moon, you are amazing. So amazing. Hearts, thank you. I appreciate that. Buse, hi. Of course you can ask something. That's what this is all about. First of all, I love your videos. I have mutational falsetto. Planning to have surgery, but I'm afraid. Oof. Lots of love from Turkey. Goodness. Okay, well, one, I don't know what mutational falsetto is. I'd have to look that up to understand how the musculature is working and things like that. But talk to your doctor if you're afraid. Talk to them. Ask them what the risks are. If possible, maybe get a second opinion if the answers are not satisfactory. You know, I always, you know, give the benefits of the doubts to surgeons and doctors in general. So I believe, I hope that they have your absolute best interests in mind. And I remember when I had my wisdom teeth out, they knew that I was a musician, and they, you know, I had to sign a waiver that said I wouldn't sue them if because there's a big nerve that runs back there, and there was a risk that my face would go numb as a result of removing my wisdom teeth. And I had to sign a waiver, and the doctor assured me that it was an incredibly rare thing and that they would do absolutely everything they could to be as careful as they could. And everything worked out fine. That was, I didn't particularly like signing that waiver. And I didn't like that fear, but the doctor, I'm sorry, I wish I could be more, I wish I could, I don't feel like I'm being terribly helpful here. But talk to your doctor, find out the risks, find out what's going to happen, and, you know, make the judgment or get a second opinion. Isaac, William, do you have any experience with acid reflux? I get acid burps when I'm singing. My vocal cords will begin to not get proper closure in my high register and not make any sound. Acid reflux can be a very, very serious issue for vocalists. Your doctor, if you're under a doctor's treatment, then they will be the first person that I would recommend you speak to about that. They would hopefully be able to talk to you about the different methods of treatment, be they dietary or medicinal or something like that. The best that I can offer you is, of course, to rest when it gets to, if it's getting sore and you're really having problems, then take vocal rest. If you're not getting any sound above the secondo passaggio, you have to take rest. Staying hydrated would be one way to allow the vocal folds ample opportunity to heal properly. But again, that depends on your doctor's orders in terms of your fluid consumption. You might, if your vocal folds are really irritated and it's causing you to cough or things like that, then you might also talk to your doctor about whether or not it's okay to have a cough suppressant of some kind, or like the throat coat tea, the slippery elm teas can be somewhat nice for those things. So yeah, acid reflux can really be problematic for vocalists. Thank you, Karina. I appreciate that. Jürgen, general tips please on how to improve vocal endurance. I can sing a song or two and already then start to feel my throat is dry and sound is slightly distorted. How to improve it? Work on vowel formation and balance. If you're getting fatigued that quickly, then you are almost certainly using too much muscle engagement at the larynx. So this is a two-part process. One is to assess your airflow and your breathing technique. Again, I am very, very fond of the Apagio breath management system and really feel that it has an incredibly helpful in terms of balancing your voice. Balancing your voice is another way to improve endurance, so that you're only using as much musculature around the larynx as is necessary to properly form the vowel sounds and the sounds that you're singing. So those would be the general tips. Ronaldo, hello. Have a nice weekend. What? Oh yes, of course, my toque. I was like, terrorist mode, what are you talking about? Peace, 2018 will be our year, mark my words, patience. Absolutely. Absolutely, Ronaldo, may it be so. May it be so. Singy McSinger Pants. Hello, ease. This is what a homeboy would say to another homeboy wearing a bandana. No bandana, it's a toque. It's a toque. It's like a tube hat. I love this thing. I've always got to rock my tube hat. Any thoughts on tuning to A432 Hertz? This Singy McSinger Pants, that is a very cool question. I think I talked about this ages ago, because I was talking to someone was asking me some questions about their band and tunings to make the guitars sound a certain way, which is a very reasonably common thing to do. It's entirely possible with digital tuning technology and even before digital tuning technology, you just had to get the appropriate tuning fork to tune things not to A440. And it didn't occur to me until then that we might, as vocalists, do that to better accommodate the registration event at the secondo passaggio. So I normally tell people that my secondo passaggio is somewhere between F and F sharp above middle C. It doesn't really feel like it's F, doesn't really feel like it's F sharp, somewhere in there. You know, most of the time I feel like it's a little bit on the higher side towards F sharp, but you know, on some days it can feel like it's closer to F. That's pretty normal too. So what occurred to me was, when you've got that, you know, as you develop that sense of where that registration event is for your voice, you could really tune your overall ensemble slightly off of A440 in order to better accommodate that, because our voices aren't built around the well-tempered system. We don't adhere to the chromatic scale, and like my voice, like anyone else's voices, it's entirely reasonable that the secondo passaggio be between two notes on the piano. So, but 432 is awfully low. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, I would be interested to know why you want to tune to 432 if you're trying to go for, like, you know, that those sorts of things have definitive effects on the listener's perception of your music. So it would probably be perceived of as being rather dark and it could also be perceived of as being, sometimes there's a certain otherworldly quality. That's what they did or that's what ended up with on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, on that album of the Beatles. Strawberry Fields Forever. There were two different versions of that, and one was like a rock and band thing, one was an orchestral thing. They sped one up, they slowed one down. It ended up in between the cracks around A flat, and that ended up giving it this very otherworldly quality, in addition to the fact that it's kind of a trippy tune already. So I think that's awesome, Singy McSinger Pants. I think go for it, but I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking. Sleepwalker, hi, hello, and everybody else. What a gentlemanly way he's wearing a hat. I've kind of made a pause in singing. Now I sound horrible to myself. Nothing sounds as it used to, so I'll be supporting from the corner and mustering strength to sing through the horror of rusty voice. Stay in there, man, or man, woman, sleepwalker. Just be patient. Take your time. Take your time. If you sang for a long time and you had a daily practice, then having some time off is gonna feel weird and it's gonna sound a bit weird. But just be patient. Take it one day at a time. Be consistent. So if you can, get a little bit of vocalizing in there every day. Speaking for myself personally, if I've had a little bit of time off, then I'll just vocalize. I won't sing any music until I start to feel like my vocalizations are coming back to where I am accustomed to them being. And then I'll start to incorporate repertoire into my practice. I'm not necessarily saying that that's what you have to do, but I find that to be, that works for me. That works for me, and I feel very comfortable in that practice. But stay in there. Mandy, hello, welcome. Oh, well, thank you. I had no idea the sideburns were so popular. Karina Chen, yes, your project breath manager really changes the tone of my singing. Great stuff. Wonderful. Okay. Hello, Mandy from Karina, JC Redding Ray. Mandy, singing McSinger Pants. Paul, it is likely inflammation of the vocal folds. So that's at Paul. There you go. Stay hydrated, plenty of sleep. That's actually excellent advice. I forget about the sleep thing. And take breaks if your voice breaks. Absolutely. Michael Officer, can you point me towards much more basic singing exercises? Yes. If you go to the playlists for my channel, there's a beginner's vocalization playlist. That would be a good place to start. Sonia S, thanks. I think the bonnet's cool. Gotta listen to this later. Bye. Bye, Sonia. Can you point me toward more basic coverage exercises? As today's too advanced for me. Yeah, read that again. At Sonia. Mandy, when doing scales and in a higher register, just below the break and then through and above it, I have found that when hitting the top note of the scale, it feels like I'm doing a little hop skip into the top note. I've been purposely trying to use more glissando, that is the right term, so it definitely feels smoother to me. Is that right, or should I avoid the slight scoop up to the note? So Mandy, okay, you're right to maintain phonation into the top note. In other words, keep going. We want to avoid the hop or the skip or the breaking of the phrase. Using a little glissando is probably okay, but I would not advocate I wouldn't go for the glissando. In other words, focus on keeping the air moving and focus on the note that you're going to. And if there's a little bit of glissando that occurs, so be it. I would suspect that as you become more accustomed to maintaining your airflow, maintaining your engagement, and really focusing on the note that you're going to, that the glissando will decrease over time. But if you're focused on it, it's going to become a part of your technique, which we want to avoid that. That's not something we want to do. Alternately, you could also work from the top down and pick exercises that begin at the high note and then sing down through the secondo passaggio. In your case, start down and then go back up. I would be keen to have you descending and then reascending to the note that you started out in order to work on that technique. Garrett, guitar, that's great. I'm glad that, you know, Jim Morrison, I haven't listened to that in a long time, and that's fine. I just am telling you, I don't advocate belting more than a major second above the secondo passaggio. You can do that from time to time, but as a consistent way of doing that, I feel that you are going to incur undue fatigue and require more rest than would be the case if you either limit yourself to a major second above the secondo passaggio or predominantly use a registration event-based technique such as transitioning smoothly over the secondo passaggio. Korean Chen, you mentioned belting is from the chest voice. How about high belt or belting high notes? No, it would not. No, if you're belting, okay, so there will certainly be some differences of opinion on this. Please don't take my word for it. What it is to belt is said to also be called entering the call of the voice. In order to do this, you have to increase breath energy and subsequent weight on the vocal fold such that the cricothyroid muscles cannot elongate the vocal fold. If the cricothyroid muscles elongate the vocal fold, you're no longer belting. Right? So they have to stay out of the picture. You have to it's all about the thyroarytenoid muscles, and so you know, like I know there's at least one instructor that talks about this high belt, but if you listen to what they're teaching, they're actually teaching you to allow the registration event. So they're calling it a belt, but they're talking about the same technique of allowing the cricothyroid muscles to elongate the vocal fold. The thing that is often mistaken with a vocalist who has very, very consistent tone across the secondo passaggio is that they are achieving voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head, when you have a balanced mode of phonation and you are allowing the oral cavity to resonate sympathetically with the vocal fold, then you get matching tone across the secondo passaggio. And to the casual listener, even the trained listener, this can sound like they're belting these really high notes, but they're not. If you're really, really talking about belting, then it's all about the thyroarytenoid muscle and increasing breath energy. And I just don't advocate doing that more than a major second above the secondo passaggio. At Michael Officer. Bach Cluck. Hi Jeff, I'd like to start this off by thanking you for helping. You're very welcome, thank you. I recently got a part in my school musical, brilliant. I'm using your videos to help me warm up for practice. Awesome, awesome, great. Keep it up, and congratulations. Garrett guitar, I struggle with singing the A4 too. I'm a baritone, I'm not surprised. Josh Harris, I am a Christian music artist. I sing tenor. I have tried to discover the technique that Christian singer David Phelps uses. I've studied bel canto technique, the resonance he gets on power C5 notes. That sounds good. I don't know David Phelps off the top of my head, but sounds good. Singwise, hello Karen, welcome, welcome. Hi Karina and JC. Bach Cluck, I have another question. I'm a baritone, though some notes I have to hit are out of my range. Do you suggest I warm up with other ranges? You can try warming up with other ranges, but if you haven't developed registration event technique yet, you may find that to be particularly frustrating or just not very effective. There are several videos on the channel that go through the technique of making a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio. I'd recommend that you check that out and, you know, try some of it. Give it a little bit of time. If you have some questions about it, come on back here and we can talk more about it. Mandy Cummins, that is high praise. My daughter says you look like Hamilton, Lin-Manuel's version, of course. I will take that and run with that. Thank you. You can say thank you on my behalf. High praise, high praise. Isaac, gonna head out. Use the baritone warm-ups daily, so thank you very much. Be well, Isaac. JC Rating Rate, Jeff, I'm a soprano exploring the lower end of my usable range. Sometimes my throat seems tight when I ascend to a higher chorus. Is slight discomfort ever okay? I would say no. There can be times when certain affectations may cause some of that, but then it becomes a question of whether or not that's truly what is required to sing or if it's simply an inconsistency in your technique. Oftentimes when we are moving from one extreme area of our voice to another extreme, it can be very difficult to anticipate the change in balance from one range to another. So, you know, if I'm singing down here, the balance of my voice is different than an octave higher up. I suppose the main thing that I would suggest you evaluate is the change in abdominal musculature engagement and expansion of the rib cage. Technically, we're talking about subglottic air pressure. That's what's going to allow the vocal fold to be dynamic with the column of air. So if we have good subglottic air pressure, what we might generically call support, then the musculature around the larynx will only be engaged as much as is necessary to produce the proper adduction of the vocal fold and sing the note. If we focus on that engagement, we will generate the appropriate suspension or subglottic air pressure, and that will allow the vocal fold to more quickly and efficiently adapt to the change in register or range if it's not over a registration event. Trying to do so consciously often results in additional musculature in the oral cavity being engaged, which has the tendency to dampen resonances and frustrate the process. So if you can be more here, both in your lateral engagement and the engagement of the musculature in the torso, you stand a much better chance of making those changes of ranges more efficiently and consequently more effectively. Ugly Moon, hello from Russia. Thanks for your lessons. We have bad teachers in pop vocals in Russia. I'm a music academy student. Thank you for joining us. It's funny, I've had clients in the past from Russia, but I don't know if we've had people in the live event from Russia. Thank you for joining us. Khalib, you have helped me so much with your warm-ups and tenor videos. Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you for joining us today. JC's Rating Ray, Josh Harris, Singwise Vocals. Oh, see you later, Karen. Yeah, have a wonderful weekend. You're probably gone, but Singing McSinger Pants. I'm interested in the more natural position of 432 Hertz and its benefit to the listener beyond just entertainment, healing, mood, etc. Interesting history on the change. Yes, there is a lot of history around the movement of A, and that is really cool. I don't know of what you are speaking. I haven't read about the healing properties of moving the tonal center of A down to 432. That sounds really cool. That sounds really, really cool. I don't think you can post links in the chat, but if you can tell me where I might read more, I would be very interested to read up on that. Heidi says, bye at Singwise. Mandy, yes, that focus on keeping phonation and the accidental glissando is exactly what I mean that happens. I doubt anyone else can hear it. Probably. I'm trying not to do it on purpose. It's crazy to me how people manage to belt any higher than a note or two above their break. Secondo passaggio. Breaks around B, B flat 4, and I have only ever belted C5, never higher because it just isn't comfortable. I am with you. Jürgen, could you please help me to figure out my voice type? I do have a good mic and can record and upload myself. My range is A2 to G4. You know, better, Jürgen, to get in touch with me via the website. So if you send an email via jeffrolka.com or voicelessonssf.com, we can work out all those details. Jürgen, oh, right, that's part of that same question. Voce piena in testa, the sound, voce piena in testa is the sound of chest voice in head. So like when you're singing, when you're singing above the secondo passaggio, the untrained vocalist will often abduct or separate the vocal fold. It gets you that breathy sound. When you have a vocalist who's learning to make a transition, it'll get smoother, but it'll be kind of hollow. You'll clearly hear that it's head voice. As we practice and practice, we learn to slowly do that transition so it becomes more, it stays more consistent. Pardon me. I'm a little froggy this morning, but you get the idea. It's voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head. Looks like there's thank you, Mandy. Thank you, JC's Radiant Ray. I truly appreciate that. Natalia Chaplin, sorry. Hello, Jeff. So many great exercises you give. Thank you. You're very welcome. Please tell me what to do if the rib cage opening feels very unnatural while singing a song. Yeah, it's probably going to be like that for a little while. You can move around a little bit to make sure that you're just staying as loose as you possibly can. I hope that this is not true for you. What happened to me when I changed my technique to Apagio breath management was that I couldn't wrap my head, figuratively speaking, around the concept of keeping the rib cage expanded. And I ended up being incredibly tense around holding that position. That's not the idea. That was, I hope that that is not a necessary stage of development, but it's one that I went through. So moving around, being a little bit fluid can help you to just not get too overall, just too like tightly engaged in that. And that will have the effect of helping you to determine the specific muscles that are assisting you in adopting the Apagio breath management system and allow you to release the musculature that is not necessary to maintain suspension for the Apagio breath management system. But it's probably going to feel a little bit weird for a while. You know, you'll read online that, you know, all this breath stuff is this and all this breath stuff is that. I would say the proof is in the pudding, but be patient in mixing the batter. I just made that up. It may take you some time and some practice to fully adopt the management system. I said earlier it didn't happen immediately, but it didn't take long. Probably took me about 8 months to get through the stage where I was overly engaged. you may not, it may go much more quickly for you, and I hope that it does. But it may take you a little bit of time. Singing, you know, there are those who would say that, you know, you sing just like you speak, that we're all overthinking this and we're all kind of making this into something it's not. Okay, well, the fact is that when you're singing a song, you're not using your voice exactly the same way as when you're speaking. And that requires some adjustments. The breathing for singing is a slight adjustment. It's not exactly how you would sing, or excuse me, breathe in your normal everyday life, but neither is singing the way that you use your voice in your normal everyday life. So be patient, persevere. If you have more questions, come on back. Mandy, sorry JC, you're doing things at the same time. I appreciate that. Mahesh, hello Jeff, what do you have to say about everyday vocal health for singers? Tips to keep the voice great. I love questions like this because truthfully, thank you Mandy, truthfully, what we do every day in mitigating the overuse of our voices is what's going to make sure that our singing voices are great and are healthy. So there's several videos on specifics of this, but mostly if you're talking a lot, try to engage. I'm engaging right now to try to keep some of the weight off of my voice. I'm not always entirely successful at that, but it does help. Stay hydrated, get good sleep, moderate your intake of, you know, caustic fluids, you know. Not to say that having a glass of beer or wine or whatever like that is going to damage your vocal fold, but don't do it right before you sing, in my opinion, okay? You know, soft tissue effects aside, alcohol impairs fine motor skill coordination. When you're singing, you're using really, really tiny muscles that we can't even actually, it's debatable whether we can actually feel the musculature working because there's no nerve endings specifically there. So you're only feeling that musculature by the surrounding nerve endings, right? So yeah, good hydration, lots of rest. Put a little bit of space between singing and any hot beverages that you happen to have. And just take good care of your person, your body. Eat well, stay healthy. If you can exercise, great, in whatever capacity that may be. Aunt Mandy. Sequencer, thank you. Right, I forgot again. Sequencer is the Facebook group that many of the people here post videos or audio and questions and talk and vocal things and all kinds of stuff. Just go over to Sequencer, a global voice on Facebook, request to enter the group, and I will okay you. It's just that simple. I should also say too, thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. I became an Amazon influencer. Woohoo! And you can find that shop. Additionally, there's like basically whatever country you're in, Amazon has a web page, and if you would be so kind as to use the links, I'm going to put all of them on the website. And I've got the UK and the US on there now. It doesn't change anything for you and your shopping experience. But if you're buying something on Amazon anyway, then a portion of that sale will be donated to this channel, which is incredibly helpful. So like I said, the US and the UK are already on jeffrolka.com. And I'm going to put a bunch of other links up there. I'm also going to be including them in my notes moving forward on the channel. There's a gigantic Hamilton fan. Yes, indeed, it is high praise. David, hello, David, welcome. Garrett, guitar, voce, piano, and testa. Thank you. Almost. I'm not sure if you're still there, Garrett, but it's voce, piano, and I can't remember if it's Ian or Ian. I think it's Ian. Hey, thought I'd share this since it's a slowish day in the chat. Last week I decided that my first drink of the day was going to be green tea with a little honey instead of coffee, and, oh, I've got to read this now. I think this is going to be bad news for me. Oh, darn. And I can actually feel a little difference. Don't know what it is, just feel generally hydrated and nice. Okay, hydrated and nice. Weird little things I come across. Haven't cut coffee altogether, just the first one. Okay, I could probably do that. But I must admit, you know, I talk very frequently about how, you know, everyone's a little bit different. Like what they drink can have an impact on their voice. Green tea and my singing voice are not friends. They are not friends at all. So I'd have to make sure I have a lot of space between that cup of green tea and whatever else is going on. The Ruby Minecart. Hello, I'm a high soprano. I have a question. I can't sing any low notes. When I do, my voice just breaks, goes away. What do I do? Good question. If you were, I talked about this a bit earlier. You may want to go back once this is published to YouTube and review that. But in short, if you were trained to bring your cricothyroid dominant singing voice lower and lower, you may never have developed the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, and that would have that would basically do what you're talking about here. It would be hard for me to say without listening to you, but it's a common thing for soprano vocalists to be trained that way. So you may want to explore those low notes a little bit, but explore them from a thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice perspective. And that will lead your way into reconciling the breaks and the transition over the secondo passaggio. Cool, Garrett. I haven't listened to Dio. I don't know if I've ever listened to Dio. Mandy, I read that. At Mandy. Jason's Rainy Ray. Jeff would discuss the range of articulators. Ribcage muscles as example. I am curious. You know, when you said articulators, I thought you were talking about consonants, like the differences between partially phonating consonants and fricatives and things like that. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to get totally like twisted up in my my terminology here. But you know, the main thing about articulators is that when you've got adequate expansion of the rib cage and you're maintaining fairly consistent engagement of the musculature in the torso, the most you're going to see is right at the solar plexus. So let me see if you can see me or not here. Yeah, you can see where my hand is. So like if I do this, he, and here's my expansion, so I'll collapse. Okay, you can see my ribs better there. So when I expand, I'm engaged here, and then here's where you're going to see the articulations. He. Oh, that's washed out. He. That little additional engagement, as I make that sound, is where the articulation is primarily originating from. Fricatives, consonants, partially phonating consonants, and things like that, in best case scenario, we keep the air moving through them, and sometimes they can allow for a little bit of additional space, like M's, can sometimes facilitate a little bit more opening in the rear of the oral cavity, but mostly we want them to just be sung through as much as possible. They're not to get in the way of the air column or disrupt the airflow. At Heidi, okay. Oh, Jürgen, what about tea, coffee? Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. Just a little bit of space in between when you're drinking the tea or coffee and then when you're singing. Results may vary too. You know, it may be something that for your voice matters not, and it's perfectly fine. It's mostly the heat of those beverages that are problematic. At Heidi, duck before you drown. Jeff, how does a person get power, like a voice that can be heard all through a building? It's an aspect of breath control, yes, but it's about resonance. The voice is a non-linear power in the voice is a non-linear occurrence. What that means is that you don't get more volume and power by pushing on it harder. You have to cultivate resonance of the voice and resonance in the surrounding tissues. Scientific American had a great article on this some years ago. I recommend it frequently. And it's talking about like the soft tissues vibrating sympathetically along with the fundamental. The fundamental is the note that you are singing. So if you want to have power, and this applies to you as well, Pandaman 082, if you want to have power, focus on balance. Balance of engagement, subglottic air pressure, or support if you prefer, and proper vowel alignment and release of the vocal mechanism. But those two things work together. So you're not going to get good release if you don't have good subglottic air pressure or support. And you won't get good resonance if you don't also have that. They've all got to work. It's all a one thing. It all works together. Heidi Banker. Hi, JC. Mahesh, how do I make myself ready to sing anytime? When someone asks me to sing, I can't tell them to wait for me to warm up. I can't always find a place to sneak off to warm up, especially on office team out tours. True that. The longer that you sing, and in particular, the longer that you maintain good vocalization practice, separate from singing songs, the less time it will almost certainly take you to warm up, and then you can just whip out a song anytime you want. You may also choose your repertoire very carefully. So maybe don't bust out Bohemian Rhapsody when they're calling a tune from you. Stick to something that's in the comfortable mid-range of your vocal range. Mandy comments, I'm one of those weird ones that can have a drink right before singing without trouble. Not wine, though. Spirits like rum or whiskey. Gosh, I sound like a drinker now, laughing out loud. Yeah, I know. Like, I did a gig one time with a guy in Reno, Nevada, who literally drank a bottle of wine while he was doing his 45-minute set and sounded no worse off for it by the end of it all. He didn't even sound like he was tipsy, you know? My voice doesn't respond well to these things. It just doesn't. And so that, that's why, like, I'm not conceptually a teetotaler, but a couple years ago now I just stopped imbibing. Sometimes I miss having a beer. Sometimes I miss having a glass of wine. Sometimes I miss having a little bullet bourbon. That's all right. A couple rocks. Lovely. But I sing every day, and I have to sing in a critical way every single day. And also, I spend a lot of time singing things incorrectly in order to make demonstrations and hopefully teach. And the wear and tear on my voice can be quite dramatic, and it's just not made any better for me personally by having those things. But I think that's great, and I think that's awesome. The Ruby, you're welcome. Mandy, and of course, I'm addicted to coffee always. Well, coffee is another matter entirely. Heidi Banker's got the coffee thing going. James, when I go from low note to high note, specifically music of the night, that your soul taking me along to be, I have a very strong increase in pressure in my upper torso, and I produce the high note. There's no strain or discomfort. What is this pressure a sign of? Subglottic air pressure. It's probably you really doing a good job of maintaining your engagement. If you're not feeling any strain or discomfort around the vocal fold, I suspect that you're just, creating quite a lot of engagement abdominally. With good expansion of the rib cage, you're feeling the subglottic air pressure. Folks, I got to wrap this up. I'm sorry I didn't get, I know there's just a few little questions here. But if you like, please pop them into the comments for this video. It'll be posted once I terminate the live event. Just copy and paste your question into the comments, and I will answer it tonight or tomorrow. I will answer the questions. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. Thank you for the questions. Super fun as always. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, JC's Radiant Ray. And everybody else, have an awesome weekend. I'll see you either on Twitter or in the comments or on Sequencer. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. And hopefully I will see you again. Bye. On Twitter or in the comments or on Sequencer, take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. And hopefully I will see you